Michigan is on bye week yet again. Wait, nope. Michigan State. It's Michigan State week this week. Guess we'll talk about it with the, we'll just talk about it. We're going to dive deep into the manifesto. We're going to get into the advanced scouting metrics with Connor Stalions on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And we have the sign stealer himself. His mom has been at Spartan Stadium. His dad flew all the way out to Los Angeles weeks ago to see Michigan State. He didn't have a dog, but he got a dog and sent the dog to Bloomington last week to check things out, to see what the Spartans are up to. That's dedication, Connor. It's dedication.
Gotta be dedicated.
Thank you all, our everydayers. Thank you to everyone who makes us your first listen. So, Connor, you've kind of taken a look into Michigan State, right?
Yeah. I've dug deep into the film.
So, okay. So you would call that means that you were advanced scouting?
Yeah. I've done a little advanced scouting and then just thinking about it. What other type of scouting is there? You post scout? You're not allowed to watch Michigan State until after you play them?
That's accurate. I guess scouting, the way I think of it is when a man and a woman love each other very much.
I mean, hey, that's basically the NCAA's definition of it.
Well, MSU's lost 4 in a row after they had penciled themselves in as not reigning, but eventual national champions after they beat Youngstown State, right? Like you do, right? They're talking, Aiden Giles for Heisman. He's significantly better than Bryce Underwood because he completed like 4 or 5 passes in a game. It was really impressive stuff. Let's start with that offensive side of the ball. What does MSU present in terms of offense, and what does Michigan's defense have to do in this game?
Obviously, Giles and Marsh have a good connection. The running back room's pretty good. They've just been so inconsistent because of their offensive line for the most part. Run game has shown flashes, but there's a lot of missed assignments on the O-line. And then their pass protection is not the greatest. So then Giles gets flushed out of the pocket a lot. He's forced to, make plays on the move, which he does sometimes, but then there's also some questionable decisions he makes. What they're really good at, though, is the screen game. They've run so many screens that you can find a lot of screens that went for no gain, but then they just keep going at it over and over and over again. Which obviously can be, if there's I could see it. I do think it's unlikely, but I could see a world in which Michigan State is, in the game or maybe even winning. And if they are, that would be due to, I think, 2 things: screens and shots. And, historically, Giles has had quite a few turnovers, and he likes to, throw 50-50 balls. But honestly, if I'm them, they struggle to pass protect. Obviously, we know Michigan's pass rush is really good. You didn't see it against USC. Why? Because USC screened the crap out of Michigan. So I think if I'm State, I would just go screens and shots 70% of the time and live with a couple interceptions as long as they're on shots that, it's like an arm punt essentially. And then the screens, I mean, that's the number one way to counter Michigan's pass rush. So, they're good at a few things, and those few things do happen to be Michigan's kind of Achilles heel. I think they'll run Childs a lot too. They've run him enough to be somewhat part of the offense, but I think you see it a lot more this week, knowing what Michigan has struggled with, specifically against Oklahoma when they really ran the quarterback. So there's certain things they can do, screen shots, quarterback run, that can make this game interesting, specifically on that side of the ball. The other side,
let's get to the other side on the next segment. But yeah, I want to stick with this idea. Do you think that what Michigan did against Washington is the proper blueprint? Because it was they didn't screen Michigan to death, but they did try the court QB run. They did try doing screens, and Michigan kind of blew it up for the most part. And as you talked about in your video,
even this Washington got a lot of yards on screens. There was a halfback screen that went for like 40 something yards, and tight end screens that went for like 8 each. The receiver screens didn't, but the halfback screens and the tight end screens I'm still a little concerned about.
Do you think that, because like those happened, it seemed more when, again, the few times since Wink was more in base, wasn't doing the sim pressures or doing as many blitzes. Do you think that Michigan being in base this game is probably the best idea?
Well, first of all, when we talk about base as a personnel with to counter like 12, 21
right.
Offensive personnel, they were in nickel the majority of the game. But if we're talking about like just 4-man pressures instead of 5-man pressures and sims,
that's what I mean.
I think even in that Washington game, there were some plays where he went 5-man pressure, and it seemed like every time they did, Washington got a first down. And then the simulated pressures, there were some plays that it was a sim. So at least you're only rushing 4. Just one of them is a linebacker or a DB, and you have 7 in coverage. The problem is one of them is a defensive end. There was some plays, like there was one I remember, it's on the breakdown I did of that Washington game, where Ernest was an edge rusher, and he's not a bad blitzer, but would you rather have Ernest edge rushing or Derek Moore edge rushing, right? So I think Michigan's best bet is just rushing their 4 defensive linemen and having the other 7 in coverage. Now, that's not to say, again, never blitz, never run a simulated pressure. There was some success specifically with some simulated pressures, but very rarely did they struggle when they rushed the 4 defensive linemen and had the other 7 in coverage. I think it's one of those things where you can kind of outthink yourself and think, if I try to put myself in Wink's shoes, if I've had X amount of years of being a defensive coordinator, I've had success in the past by doing X, Y, and Z. Well, this team is more built, like they're just really good at what they're good at. And they're not the greatest at what they're not the greatest at. So putting guys in position to just do the thing they're good at and counting on success. And I think obviously Michigan's seen the most success when they've done that. And I think this is another game similar to last week. Now, I do think, Washington has a better roster, a better team, and a better season than Michigan State. But in terms of you're not playing a team that's more talented than you, where you have to rely and take some risks, have to rely on some 5-man pressures and some exotics. I think they can just keep it relatively simple while still somewhat confusing Childs. And that's another thing too, like Michigan's coverage, there's a lot that they do on the back end that quite frankly, you can't really see in the TV copy, but they'll show a 2 high shell and then they'll rotate to a 1 high call after the snap. Or sometimes they even show 1 high post safety and then they'll be in a like cover 2 after the ball snaps. So they can still disguise a lot without taking those risks of sending a 5th rusher.
Well, let's get into the other side of the ball where Michigan has its own marsh, and it's I don't know why the bad joke there. It wasn't necessary. I'm so sorry to Connor, to the audience, to Suri, who's sitting here. She's sighing underneath. Anyway, let's get into the other side. Let's do that here in just a moment. But before we do, one of the tools that makes a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly Open Phone. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or your computer, so no more carrying around 2 phones like a crazy person or relying on a landline. I love how Quo, formerly known as Open Phone, lets your team share one number and collaborate on calls and text like a shared inbox, so no customer gets left hanging whether you're a solo operator juggling everything or a part of a larger team. Quo makes it relatively easy. And when I say relatively, I mean completely easy to stay responsive and professional. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly Open Phone. Get started for free and also get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. You can even keep your existing number for free. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, we're going to continue on momentarily, but before we do, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built same-game parlays, tried player props, and even followed live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little something extra riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right, Connor. Bryce Underwood maybe had his best game, as you noted in your recap video. Really made no mistakes in this last one. Obviously going to need to be just as sharp, perhaps sharper, kind of given the rivalry of it all coming up here. So what are the challenges for the Michigan offense against the MSU defense?
This side of the ball, I do think, is a little different than the other. I can see Michigan State's offense keeping them in the game. Their defense has been underwhelming this year. And that's not to say that they can't play their best game this week. They probably will. But their pass rush is not good. They're pretty bad with their angles, open space tackling. This game's just more about Michigan building off of the progress they've made and not taking steps backwards, in my opinion. I'm trying to. This is no disrespect to Michigan State. Again, I guarantee they're going to play their best game.
Disrespect them. They don't respect you, Connor. Well, they're not going to look at this and be like, that Connor Stalions and Isaiah Hole, we really like what they had to say. That's not happening.
Well, you never know what they do, but I think on this side of the ball, it just comes down to Michigan being, sound, sticking to their assignments and building off of last week. I think that's what the majority of fans are probably thinking, like consistency, right? Where it seems like, oh, it's good week this week, bad week the next week, good week, bad week. Now, I do think the offense, like we talked about last week, the offense has not been as bad as people made it out to be. Even coming out of that USC game, the offense wasn't that bad. There was a couple drive killers, but you could see the progress that the offense is making week to week. And I think you saw it culminate last week with a good box score, so to say, right? Talk about the box score stat warriors. I was mostly impressed with the way that the run game and the play action game and the play action boot game are all intertwined, where it's like perfectly building off one another. And you just want to see that with like maybe a couple new wrinkles each week going into the last week. Well, mostly going into that Northwestern game that we keep talking about.
Yeah, I mean, the big rivalry game. It does have a trophy. So you said on your video that Michigan, in your estimation, has maybe the best boot game in the country. I just want to, can you elaborate on that? Like what makes that potentially the best in the country?
Well, it starts with the run game, because they're so effective running the ball now more and more out of like 10 and 11 personnel looks, where tight end sometimes is not even in the core and they're motioning him in, running split zone. And basically what that does, like if I'm a linebacker and I have, say, the A gap and the tight end is after the snap falling back from one side to the other, I have to go from the A gap to, say, I have to fall back to the other B gap or whatever with that tight end falling back. And when Michigan's running wide zone, if you just picture this, like wide zone to the left, but then the tight end's falling back to the right, human nature is like, oh no, I got to go with the offensive line and my traveling left A gap, but then he's falling back to the right. So I got to actually go back to the right B gap. And when Michigan's run game is so effective and Jordan Marshall and hopefully Justice Haynes is back and they're getting 5, 6, 7, 8 yards a pop, even on plays where there's not a lot of space. And you got Jordan Marshall, who's a really tough runner, falling forward every time, getting 7 or 8 yards. You're so focused on that the next time it's the same exact look. The tight end's falling back. You think he's going to slice the defensive end and then he slips right by. And now who's covering him? It's supposed to be that linebacker who's so worried about the run. So I think that's where it all starts, how effective they are in the run game. But then the looks in boot are the same exact looks in the run game. So if you took a screenshot right before the tight end slides by the defensive end, or a screenshot right before the tight end actually slices and blocks the defensive end, it's almost the same exact picture every time. So the way that Chip has married the run game with that boot play action, that's definitely the foundation. I mean, you're always going to have an effective boot game with that. And then now add the element of Andrew Marsh, Donovan McCulley. And I know Samaj has been a little inconsistent with some drops, but he's a guy that if you're the defense, like you don't want him to have the ball in open space, right? He's really shifty. He's really quick. So even getting him on those slide actions and running to the flat. And then obviously now the tight ends, I don't know if Marlon's playing this week, but the tight end room is so deep now, and you're starting to see it the last couple of weeks, that you put all that together and everyone's very versatile with both run and pass game. And you marry that with perfect scheme that looks identical, whether it's run or pass. That's why I think Michigan's boot game is how good it is.
All right. That's awesome info. We're going to continue on. We need to get into why the real nitty gritty as to why Canada Mike is afraid to play you in Sudoku. We are going to get to that and maybe some more. Maybe we'll get into some more football, but we'll see. We'll see if we have time. We'll get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. Listen, I was just watching episodes of the Grand Tour yesterday, and they're just raving about the Mazda cars. And you know how high that is coming from those guys. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, Connor. So why is Canada Mike afraid to play you in Sudoku? Why does he not want this rematch?
He was embarrassed in front of many people last year, and then now he just plays it off. Like every time he sees me and I ask him if we're playing, and then he says, oh, I know that you told Ben to not bring a Sudoku this week, and he's just trying to deflect. Quite frankly, I didn't know that they had the same numbering system in Canada that we do here. So now that I know that, I don't understand what his excuses are stemming from, but he's in his own head with it. Well,
coward, I think, is the first word that comes to mind. Yeah. Coward. I mean, we already call him Canada Mike, but Canadian, that's the other one. Mm-hmm. Don't know. I mean, I've learned pretty much everything I know about Canadians from South Park, right?
The guy brought Tim Hortons to the tailgate last week, and he didn't even bring it from a Canadian Tim Hortons. What kind of Canadian is he?
I mean, you got to import that. You can't. I don't know that I can trust any of that. Much like I don't know that I can trust MSU. This is what we call the segue here. I don't know that I can trust MSU to keep it professional in this game, which is ironic. Given, like, did you see Nick Marsh came out and was like, oh, Michigan's going to try to bait us and they're going to try to get us to do all these, but we don't care about it. We're not going to fall for the bait. And it's like, Nick, which Marsh are you? Are you Andrew Marsh or are you Nick Marsh? Because what bizarro world are we living in here? Is this Marvel's What If? Does that confuse you as much as it confuses me?
Personally, I don't even want to be on this topic for long, but I think it was you I was listening to yesterday that made a good point about how it seems like every year that Michigan wins, this is what the topic is after the game. Yeah. And then every year Michigan loses, it's just like, all right, they lost, Michigan State won. Press conference.
That didn't happen after 2020.
So personally, I mean, I guess I hope that there is some sort of topic or gossip after the game, because that probably means Michigan won. But I mean, I went on a little rant at the end on my Michigan State preview. Put that in the description too.
Yeah, you called somebody out.
Growing up in Michigan, like, you're surrounded by Sparties, right? You're not surrounded by Buckeyes, so it's more personal. The Michigan State game is more personal, right? Now, like I've said, maybe the Ohio State game is a little more personal now for different reasons. We can talk about that later, but like, this is, it's the state championship, right? And I don't mean this in a disrespectful way. There are very few teams like Michigan, Alabama, where like multiple teams claim you as their main rival, right? Like Bama, Tennessee does, Auburn does, sometimes LSU. Michigan, you have Michigan State, Ohio State used to be kind of Notre Dame. Obviously they don't play anymore, but
because they're too afraid. Ultimately, Notre Dame, they're too afraid.
Yep. But like, this is Michigan State's biggest game of the year. And I think if you're Michigan, you're really dumb to play it off like it's not our biggest game of the year this week, right? Now, I know you could be like, well, you could say that every week, but the way I see it is like, Michigan State is your biggest game of the year. And then once you play them, then Ohio State's the biggest game of the year. And with the exception of maybe like 2008, 2009 through 2014, Michigan State had the better roster those years. But outside of that, Michigan's always had the better roster. They've always been, for the most part, the favorite. They've always had just as good as or a better record, with the exception of a couple of years. But you expect like, oh yeah, Michigan is the quote unquote big brother in that analogy. And then Michigan State finds a way to win. Right. So it's like you've seen it over and over again, 2015, 2017, 2020. And I think about like, I know hindsight's 2020, but ironically, if you go back to 2020, the year, I know we were all like in our houses, but if we were having the same podcast in 2020, going into the Michigan State week, right after Michigan beat Minnesota, looked really good, and Michigan State, I don't even know who they played the week prior, but
Rutgers.
I just remember. Okay. And
they lost to Rutgers the week before.
Yeah. And they did not have a good team. Mm-hmm. We'd probably be having the same conversation. Right. And then a week later, we'd be on this like, what the heck happened? And I'm sure the same thing in 2017. Now, 2015 was a little different because both teams were like top 10, whatever they were, top 15. But again, yeah, you see the story over and over again. And sure, is there a great chance a week from now we're like, yeah, we overestimated them and yeah, it was a blowout win? Maybe. Yeah. But at the same time, I can totally see a world in which we're like, whew, that was way too close, or God forbid, like what the heck happened? So I think it's you could also compare it to Ohio State last year, right? They were going into the game, we're going to win by 70, put up 100 on them, this and that. And then after the game, like what the heck happened? And so I think Michigan needs to learn from its own historical mistakes. Obviously hadn't lost to them in a few years. So the guys on the roster now haven't lost to them, which kind of makes you a little more worried. Just from the standpoint of like, do the guys on the roster really get it? Right now, obviously some of the coaches have been around for a couple losses against them, but it's easy when you get all these national recruits. I'm not saying Michigan State doesn't recruit nationally, but all these national recruits that come in the program and have never lost to Michigan State to just view them like another game. And then in the meantime, Michigan State has a lot more regional and local recruits that take it more personally. And they've never beat Michigan, so they're 10 times more inspired to do so. And so you just really want to emphasize to the guys in the program, like, hey, no, like this is a dogfight. Don't expect anything else.
It's funny because this is a rivalry where it's the opposite of Ohio State in terms of, like you just said, there aren't a lot of guys on Michigan's roster that have lost this game before, and vice versa.
There aren't any, are there?
Probably not. No, because we're talking.
Bredesen was there in 21.
Yeah, Bredesen would have been like
your freshman,
and Rayshawn Benny.
Yeah. Like a few. You can count on one hand.
But like when you look on the other side, you had to say hand, by the way. Thanks a lot.
Well, you might need two hands.
Yeah. We're doing the Buster Blue thing. Like, anyway, whereas like that maybe does pose a problem in this game compared to like Michigan, Ohio State. It's like, you need to have that experience of winning that game. Otherwise you end up in, you're just going to, and a lot of times you're just going to lose, right? Like you have to create your own luck there. And you saw that with a lot of those Michigan teams. I mean, you were there in the shoe in 2016, and it's just like when you're accustomed to losing that game, you find a way to lose. And this game, I think, does need something else. Before we end here, you did call someone out on your show, and just got to say, I'd hate to be that guy.
No, yeah. I mean, I listened to you yesterday and I know you were like, what'd you say? It's, you mentioned about how people talk about throw the records out of this game and how it hasn't always applied. It's like, shoot, even if it's happened once, throw the records out. Like it goes back to what I was just talking about. Like you don't want the guys thinking this is just another game, because it's not. Right. Let's be real. It is the second most important game when you look from week 1 to the very end. Obviously that Ohio State game, but like in the first 10 weeks, this is the most important game of the year.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm not saying that that's not right. I
know we're not in the program, so we can say whatever we want, but it's just a mentality thing. We've both experienced enough surprises where nothing surprises me in this rivalry.
Listen, I don't know what you're talking about. So it's weird that they shut down the rivalry for most of the D'Antonio era. That just didn't. And then Harbaugh comes and I'm like, they played like 3/4 of the 2015 game. And then it just ended. And we don't even know what ended up happening. It's weird how that worked out.
I don't know.
All right. Well,
the last we saw was Desmond Howard, like thumbs up.
Yeah.
That's the camera. And that was the video cut.
Yeah. Cut to black. Game over. Everyone have a good game. This is where I'm going to end on. I do wish that it would be more of like that, like true sibling rivalry, in the sense of like when you lose, you win or lose the game, or what doesn't really, whatever. It was not toxic. And that's the thing that I'm tired of with this rivalry. And like, I remember being in school back in 1999 and I was a freshman at Michigan. I had several friends who were freshmen at Michigan State. And when Michigan lost that game, I called up my buddy Jason and I was like, we'll get you next year. Like that was the mentality. It's like, this sucks, but we'll get you next year. And now it's like the loser is like, I am going to murder everyone you've ever loved.
Right after the game too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So,
and I did call it the one tunnel rivalry. I realized both stadiums, one tunnel.
Yeah. If there wasn't like a bunch of farm equipment in the MSU tunnel, then maybe there could really be, something happen. Cows just kind of meandering. Okay. That's enough jabbing the rivalry, making them madder than I already do make them. It's Connor Stalions. Check out his channel. It's linked. It's you'll see it here on the end screen as well. If you're on YouTube, you don't have that. You can try clicking on stuff, hitting your dashboard. If you're listening on audio, probably won't bring you to his channel. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you again, hopefully talking about nothing controversial next week. We're just sanguine going into Purdue. Hopefully. That's going to do it for us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.